Hi everybody and welcome to the One Wildlife podcast with me, Abbie Barnes. This is simply a show about life, and as such there are no boundaries to where our conversations can take us. Along the way, we simply aim to inspire, empower, educate and uplift, exploring how we can all live our best lives every single day. Before we get started, I want to mention that this podcast is hosted by Spend More Time in the Wild, which I founded in 2016 to help individuals get outside for the benefit of mental and physical health. Over the last few years, the project has grown into a worldwide community of passionate and courageous individuals working together to enjoy the beauty of our wild spaces and protect them for generations to come. You can find out more about both the podcast and Wild by visiting www.spendmoretimeinthewild.co.uk. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening, or head on to YouTube to watch the full episode. Today's guest cares deeply about the natural environment and has made it her mission to do all she can to protect her country's wild spaces. Amanda Dudgeon originally set out to work in gastronomy, but during her studies in Italy, she was inspired to reroute her career path by studying integrated resource management as a Bachelors of Applied Science at the University of Queensland. She then went on to work with a number of prestigious environmental organisations, and it was in 2014 that she began her work as a ranger in various regions across Australia, including Queensland, Victoria, and the Northern Territory. Her mission, she says, is to help others and make a difference in the world. In 2020, she began work as a park ranger in the New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service, which manages over 850 protected areas and reserves and over 7 million hectares of land. Amanda is without doubt one of the most passionate and well-rounded environmentalists I know. Whilst working full-time, she is currently in the throes of developing an exciting new project for 2021, designed to raise awareness and support for Australia's wild spaces and the people who protect it. Amanda, welcome to the One Wildlife podcast.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
How are you doing today? Well, what time is it where you are?
Well, Queensland time or East Coast Australia time. East Coast Australia time, it's like 9:40. Queensland time, it's 8:40 because they're special.
Oh, they're special, are they?
They're very special.
How have you, so we are in January 2021. How are you coping, having made it through the carnage that was 2020?
Well, I feel kind of bad in a way because 2020 was actually a great year for me. So by and large, I was not very much impacted by COVID apart from wonderfully having the park to ourselves in Central Australia when we were sort of locked in there. So I suppose I've done pretty well out of actually. Blessed in that way.
Got plenty of places to run around in, I guess.
Yes, definitely a blessing of being a ranger is COVID doesn't stop our work. We still get to go into the outdoors, which is wonderful.
That is pretty good. Well, before we jump into your work as a ranger and the environment, I would like to go right back. So most of our listeners are based in the UK and the United States, so the Northern Hemisphere. And many of us, I know, would like to visit the sunny shores of Australia. But could you tell us what it's like or what it was like growing up in Australia? And did you have a connection with the outdoors from a very early age?
Yeah, that's a very good question. What it's like to grow up in Australia. It's wonderful. It's all Skippy and Steve Owen. No, well, I suppose a lot has changed obviously over the last 30 years, but we're lucky growing up that I did live in a few different states. We moved quite a bit. So I started off living in Queensland, so lovely, sunny, humid Queensland in Brisbane, and also spent time in country in New South Wales. So these are the eastern states of Australia. And then spent high school down in Melbourne in the southeast of Australia, where it's pretty similar to England at times in terms of weather. But I suppose the thing that struck me as a difference between Australia and when I lived overseas in Italy was that you grow up having a lot of hope and joy for the future. Like there's always this sense of what do you want to be when you grow up, and it's a really positive thing, and every kid has an answer, and there's this sense of life can provide you with amazing opportunities no matter what your background is from. And I think some of that was obviously growing up in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, but also some of that was, I think we are pretty lucky to be in Australia, in that there is that sense of optimism, and yes, she'll be right even when it's not necessarily going to be right. So I think that really struck me when I not only visited overseas, but when I lived there, was that sense of optimism that just wasn't quite the same when I was overseas. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll jump to Italy in a minute, but you mentioned growing up, like what you want to be when you're growing up, and there's endless possibilities. What did you want to be when you were growing up?
Well, the lack of stones in my grandfather's carport when he was trying to sell his house is a testament to the fact that I wanted to be a geologist. And the very, very big shorts that the pockets in my mum's shorts that she had to sort of start making to fit all the rocks that I used to collect on the walks that we'd go on, that kind of thing. Yeah, I really wanted to be either a geologist or an anthropologist. Thank you, Indiana Jones, and Jurassic Park, really, as well.
Yes,
I have to say that.
Got to get that in there.
Yeah, so I loved rocks and wanted to be a geologist, and I think I was just blessed, as well as my sister, that we did spend time in parks. So I was, I suppose, pretty had a really good experience being outside, because we did go and visit national parks and beaches and places all over Australia. That's sort of what we did as a family. So there was always this sense of the world is out there and the world is our oyster, and isn't it amazing? And my dad being a science background, I think, helped as well. So yeah, really loved geology, though in the end I really sucked at chemistry when you add the maths to it. So that was kind of ended that somewhat. I still have a lot of rocks, it's true, but not unlike my sister, who wanted to be a climatologist and then wasn't really awesome at maths. Yeah.
Well, it's good to have a good rock collection. I mean, I would be lying if I said I didn't have a few pocketfuls worth of rocks as well.
Exactly. So yeah, I think it was always things, there was a role that was always sort of about being outside and discovering and exploring the world. So, but I never in my wildest dreams thought of being a park ranger, to be honest, bizarrely.
You mentioned national parks there, and I'm holding fire with the ranger stuff because I have a bazillion avenues to go down with that. But as a kid, like, what is it like? What was it like having all of this wide open space to access? And is your national park system in Australia very similar to ours? Because here in the UK we've got our I'm on the spot now, like 13 national parks, I believe, all across the country. They're managed by ranger teams, and anyone can go and access them. Is it the same in Australia? I mean, because you've got a lot more land to run around in.
Yeah, well, I suppose in terms, we have obviously different types of reserves, but for example, in Adelaide, when I worked in Adelaide Hills, we had, probably 30 parks in our district alone.
Oh, wow.
So we have quite a lot of parks. I think, this is terrible, I should know these percentages. I think it's like 9% of Australia is...
I think I read similar, 8%. I think I read is protected.
Yeah, and actually a really good proportion is South Australia, because so much of the desert is protected. Well, I suppose we have quite a lot of national parks, and anywhere where people probably didn't want to live, it's probably a park. And that's or if it's really difficult to put cattle there, or it's just inhospitable country, it's probably a park. So that's generally what the parks were. They started off not dissimilarly, very much in a similar way to America, in the very much the same vein, where the Royal National Park near Sydney was the very first national park in Australia, and only the second in the world, actually.
Oh, wow.
And it was then the second one, which was one of my parks, Belair National Park, was number 2 in Australia and number 5 in the world. And it was that same reason as the national park system in America was created, was to protect these really amazing places so people could go and appreciate and recreate. So there's a combination of conservation and recreation of the beauty of the place that they can go and appreciate on their doorstep, and also to protect it from being developed, basically. So we do have a lot of places like that, and we're very lucky that we have them close to our urban centres. But I suppose the difference between some of the ones in I suppose the UK and in Australia, and similar to the US, is you often have to drive to get to them. Yes. So they're apart from Adelaide, where Belair very uniquely has a train going right to it, you do often have to drive to get there. So that, I suppose, impacts access. But yeah, most kids in Australia growing up, a lot of your field trips in primary school, which is when you're younger, and then high school when you're older, there'll always be at least a couple of years where you go into national parks, and not just for your science subjects, but also just as part of your end of year things, because they're such amazing places to go for a walk and have barbecues and recreate in. So. Very
inspirational places, I'm sure.
Oh, some of them are just, mind-blowing. Like we're pretty lucky as a kid to visit like Mossman Gorge. That's absolutely stunning. Freezing cold water, but stunning rainforests and water, and, Barron Falls up in far north Queensland, where, with tropical rainfall, they're just some of the most amazing waterfalls that very brown because there's lots of soil coming down because of the intense tropical rain, and they're not always running the same level, but they're just mind-blowingly amazing to see the changes in the seasons. So to experience that as a kid that not a lot of city kids necessarily had the opportunity to do, I was very lucky. But at the same time, I think that is, again, one of the differences between overseas and Australia, is that most Australian kids do get out there and experience that. So we certainly felt that, I suppose, change in kids' awareness of the outdoors and fitness levels and some of those things that we're seeing as a problem now, I think was a lot more delayed in Australia, because it's such a part of Australian culture is going to the beach and going outside and visiting a park and riding your bike, and sport's such a big part of our national identity that I think helps a lot.
That's very interesting, sort of seeing that thread running through from childhood right through to adulthood, having that appreciation for the spaces around you. But all right, so we will come back to nature and wild spaces in a moment. I want to now take the focus to food, because we've had a few conversations over the year, and we've talked just a little bit about food. Now, you wanted to be a chef at one point, is that correct?
Indeed. In year 9, there was an elective subject called hospitality, and a bunch of the students in my year did that. Majority kids who just wanted a bird course, I'll admit. But I was just generally curious. I did like photography and hospitality and something else. They were interesting options. And we were very lucky that our teacher was actually an ex front of house staff, so a waitress, a career waitress at that, from fine dining, and her husband was a fine dining chef. So she was really passionate about hospitality and how it was more than just putting food on a plate. It was creating an experience for customers, and it was something that could be a really amazing career and such a beautiful thing. And every single person in that class ended up working in hospitality. I mean, there's chefs in Europe from our class, there's restaurant managers and hospitality managers in Australia from our class, because we were so inspired. So it was pretty amazing. I think they worked it out by year 12, because we went from, a half full home economics class in your final year of school to 2 full classes. They had to make them bigger and double them for our year, because the whole class was interested. So that was, that's what really got me interested.
Really shows what a passionate teacher can do, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely a backup career, that one. Being able to inspire people as a teacher, that's a pretty amazing thing. So she was a fantastic teacher, and that certainly inspired many. And then that was, I was like, wow, that'd be fantastic. Do I really want to do that? And interestingly, a lot of people when I was in year 12 were like, no, don't do it. You'll have no social life. You'll never see anyone. I'm like, because that's how to choose a career. It's the most important thing to think about is, your social life. So I was the sort of, call me Marty McFly, but I wanted to do it anyway. But that really just cemented the decision of like, well, if you think I shouldn't do it, of course I'm going to do it, because it's something that I want to do.
Yeah,
exactly. Just call me chicken. So that's, and I always wanted to do a fine dining. I was never going to just be, as some people call it, a packet opener, or like a basic cook. It's harsh, but I suppose it's what the difference between when you make everything from scratch and when you open a lot of packets. So I always wanted to work somewhere where you were very creative, and it really was about creating an amazing experience, and you could do, really great things. So that's why I wanted to work, I suppose, in the not necessarily like full sort of Michelin star fine dining, but really amazing restaurants where everyone was there for the right reason, I suppose.
Yeah, that's it. And you went on to Italy, I think in 2008, to study at the University of Gastronomic Science. And it seems, having done a little bit of research, you got involved in some very interesting projects there during your year studying.
I did indeed. Actually, one of our chef lecturers at one of the TAFEs I went to, which is a trade school in Australia, he had won a scholarship with the slow food movement to go and do a sabbatical in Italy, and he gave a talk, and it was like second year apprentice, and I was like, wow, that's the next step. That's what I want to do. That's making a difference, not just being a chef. So I went over there and was very lucky that the year above us, there were some amazing students in that year, and they launched the youth food movement, which was, we launched during Terra Madre, the food festival, and had kids from all over the world coming and being a part of that. And as part of that, they had been the United Nations Commission for Sustainable Development, one of the groups that contributes to their discussions and decisions. The Women's and Children's Group had reached out to some of the students and asked if we would run a workshop with these students and discuss the issues at the time, which were in the end quite relevant to an Australian, and all the Europeans were like, oh, you run it. We don't know about these topics, which was desertification, rural development, those sorts of things that didn't make a lot of sense in the Northern Hemisphere so much. So I offered to run that, and it was absolutely amazing that these kids from all over the world, from all different backgrounds and demographics, were just so passionate about protecting their food culture and helping that persist. And these are anywhere from like 10-year-olds or young teenagers through to young people in their early 20s, and some were just, it was amazing. And I was like, well, it's great being a chef and it's great being here, but just not really making a difference in the world. And that's something I always really, really wanted to do. And I suppose the saying of, charity starts at home, well, I believe so does sustainability, and so does conservation. So who were we as a society in Australia to tell other people to better manage their resources when we haven't got our stuff together? So that's when I chose to make the decision to come back to Australia and study natural resources management or similar, and work in that space to, I suppose, be that change I wanted to see in the world. So,
and is that really where you're interested in sustainability sort of was birthed from when you were in Italy, or was it sort of an undercurrent theme before that?
I think it was always an undercurrent theme, because obviously enjoying geology as a kid and loving those subjects at school, and had the geography was always, and that's a really big theme in geology is, landscape processes. And one of the rare places you do actually learn about the environmental destruction, certainly early on in the piece when it wasn't well documented by the media or promoted very much, was you learnt it in geography, because you learnt about the changes that are happening and how scientists are discovering, maybe climate change wasn't necessarily a term coined, but it was certainly discussed, our impacts on things and how you measured that. And that was, I suppose, where I'd first been exposed to it. But also having spent time with my father when he was doing field work. He was a geospatial scientist when we were growing up in country New South Wales. So we got to go out when he did ground truthing for remote sensed images, which was taking a gyrocopter out and having a look at what was actually the reality on the ground and comparing that to the images satellites took to confirm it. So we were sort of out doing these things that we just took for granted, going, oh, yeah, that's just what you do. But we didn't realise that most kids don't literally go out the back of Burke and camp in the middle of nowhere with a random gyrocopter. And, you know, it's like that kind of, I was aware of the landscape, and we'd been to national parks and learned about things in geography, and I suppose just sort of put those things together, and yeah, it just made sense. So and that was really cemented for me in Italy, when I noticed that a lot of the students were passionate about food culture, but they didn't understand anything behind that, or not as much behind that, all the natural resources stuff, the environmental stuff of the consequences of the food industry, and how that will play a big role in the biocultural diversity, which was a term that was really important to us at the uni. So yeah, it was interesting to see that just my general knowledge from high school and, you know, what I'd grown up seeing in my observations put me sort of far ahead of a lot of the students there in terms of awareness of these issues.
I really think that's is wonderful, actually, because again, you know, we pretty much any sector we go into has some kind of connection to the environment, but you have to get beyond the superficial. And, you know, of course you could go into chefing or into fine dining or catering or whatever that looks like, but whatever you choose, it is going to have a connection and therefore, quote unquote, an impact on the environment. And I love that you have that, or had that bigger vision, that bigger understanding, knowing that we're all part of a bigger picture. And not only did you just have that awareness and decide, okay, you know, I'm going to stay in food, in gastronomy, and you know, just keep my focus there and do good things with food, but you actually go, no, I want to get my feet on the soil and I want to get out there and make a difference. So you studied natural resource management. How did it go from there to becoming a ranger?
Yeah, exactly. I'm still wondering. No. Well, the idea of even becoming a ranger, I hadn't really thought of it. I was like, a ranger is a ranger, you know, halfway between Russell Coight, Australians will know who that is, and Steve Irwin. But during one of my electives in, I think it was my final year, it was great. There were so great electives in my degree. It was literally just a field trip and an assignment. Loved it. And this one involved us travelling around Queensland and visiting a whole lot of national parks, speaking to rangers, talking to natural resource or catchment authorities, and we met some really amazing people. And in particular, on some of our last couple of days, we went to Airlie Beach and did a day out on the reef and came back. It was a tough life as a student in Queensland. And we met this phenomenal ranger who inspired the whole class. He was just so passionate and so involved in his community. And, you know, he was out there in the middle of the night doing stuff to research pigs, out with the, you know, pig hunters to check the traps and research and understand them, you know, getting down nerdy in the mud, going out with the community, you know, the next day at the crack of dawn to help with moving wallabies to an offshore island for their conservation. And he was just so involved in every aspect and so passionate and so amazingly progressive and sort of current, and not the exact opposite of what you would stereotype as a ranger, as someone who, I've come across a few of them where they're sort of stuck in there, oh, this is the way we've always done it, and we just keep doing it this way if you don't change things. And just, you know, it was just amazing. And I think he had a few ideas different to our lecturer, because we were all inspired. So there was one big question at the end of the exam that we had a few days later, and in our assignment, and all of us agreed with this ranger. And all of us were just determined to disagree with our lecturer, who had a difference of opinion to us. So all of us went, stuff that, this guy's amazing. And we all wrote against what we were meant to write because we agreed with the ranger, and all lost marks because of it. But we were so like, no, this is correct. It's about being progressive and doing the right thing, not status quo. So I thought that was fantastic. We were total rebels. But it really sort of planted that seed of, wow, that'd actually be a really amazing job and you could make a difference and really inspire people. And I was like, oh, that actually sounds pretty amazing. So then, yeah, when I finished my degree, and I was applying for graduate positions because I really wanted to have the flexibility of, always wanted to work in government, and had the flexibility of being able to go into policy and those kind of influential positions, but hadn't really thought about necessarily being on the ground. And then I was working for the International River Foundation, which is a fantastic organisation, and I heard about the Graduate Ranger program in South Australia, and I was like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. because you basically get to be like on the ground and spending 6 months in a different spot for 2 years, and I applied, and yeah, the rest is history, really.
How was that? It's so nice because right there, in the short time that we've already been talking, there are two key people who have so dramatically influenced your life, your career path, and really ignited that passion within you. And it's just, that's so special, I feel, because this day and age, especially with COVID, it's so hard to meet people and to interact in that same way right now. Hopefully we'll get back to that. But, you've actually had those face-to-face, human-to-human interactions, and those are what have ignited you and propelled you forwards. And, I'm just thinking about the young people at the moment, going through their education, they're lacking that interaction, everything, the whole system is just a bit carnage at the moment, and it really goes to show what just one strong, focused, passionate individual can do to influence young people, and people who are open-minded. And I just think that's really special.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I certainly hold on to as a ranger. I mean, everyone who works in, protected areas is passionate about what they do. We said we absolutely are the job. But, sometimes stepping back, and particularly the previous generation of rangers who are all about, I want to go out into the park, and I want to, get rid of the weeds, and I want to experience, and they're so passionate about being out in the park, but some don't realize that actually your greatest impact is that moment when you're talking to a kid on park and they connect something with the environment. So you're doing a ranger walk or just having a chat, or they ask a question about a plant or an animal or something they've seen, and you explain it to them and they learn something new, and suddenly it's real. Suddenly that you literally see the light bulb go on, and you're just like, wow. So that for the rest of their lives, every single decision will be colored by that influence, and that's how you make a difference.
That's it. So what does it take to become a ranger in Australia then? Like, what's the process to get from A to B?
I was just asked that the other day, actually, by the policeman at the border to come into Queensland. He goes, what do you need to do to become a ranger? It's like the newest thing. People don't ask, what does a ranger do? They ask, well, how do you become a ranger?
How do you become one?
Yeah, everyone's like, I want to bail my office job. I want to be a ranger. So in Australia, it's a little bit different. So I suppose the definition of ranger is probably something you should touch on, because there's a park ranger, which is what I am, but there's also cultural rangers and community rangers and different kinds of staff who don't have ranger in the title but still deliver the same kinds of things. So we have field staff who are what other people would consider a ranger in terms of what they do. So I suppose to be a protected area employee or work in protected areas, you don't have to go to university, and you don't have to be a young person and go in from the start. You can, at any time in life, I met a ranger just the other day randomly. Was getting lunch in our town where our National Parks office is, and she just tapped me on the shoulder because she saw the uniform, and she's like, oh, are you a ranger here? And I was like, yeah. She was, oh, I'm a ranger down at Port Macquarie, or I think it was Port Macquarie she was from, and she was I think American originally, and she just decided to change careers in her 40s and go, no, I want to work in parks. So anyone can do it. But in Australia, to be specifically a ranger, it's more a role that's less just field-based and more a mixture of office and field, or predominantly office, depending on which state or jurisdiction you work in. So you will, not because the, I suppose, requirement of the job dictates you have to have it, but because it's so competitive and everyone wants to be a ranger, there's only so many jobs, you really do have to have a degree and often a postgraduate qualification. But having life experience goes a really, really long way as well. And you'll often find that a lot of new recruits are actually not school leavers, because the value of having life experience in another industry, be it a trade or something else, means you're so much, in some ways, more valuable as a ranger, because you're bringing this other element to it, and you're often choosing it because it's really a vocation. It's something you're passionate about. It's not just a job, and it's one of those jobs, I suppose, to be a ranger, you need to be someone who wants to do it because you love it, and is, you know, able to continue to tell themselves that when they're dealing with a blocked toilet or some other really lovely situation.
Don't we
But
all?
I love my job. I want to be here doing this, you know. Or indeed when you're, you know, facing a really horrific emergency response scenario. People don't realise very often first responders, particularly in remote areas, and that can be quite traumatic. It can be challenging when you're dealing with compliance, which is a big part of our jobs. And as much as we're lucky that we don't need to carry sidearms as you do in the US, sometimes it would be nice to have the respect they come with. So often also, because you're not a police officer or something with that sort of standing in the community, you don't always garner, unfortunately, the same respect. So it's you really do learn to eat, I suppose, humble pie. You're very good at biting your tongue and being very diplomatic, and having outlets in your life. So I suppose, to answer your question more succinctly, to be a ranger, you need to be someone who ideally has a qualification. That's really important. Does volunteering and is showing that they've committed to learning more about the outside world, be it small learnings or just volunteering your own time to show that you're willing to put the effort in, and a real passion for the job, that, you know, you're willing to do anything. Nothing is above a ranger, and that's an important lesson that some people don't realise and learn very much the hard way. You know, we are generalists and we are everything, and people expect us to know everything, even though we don't. Like when people ask me what a plant is, and I'm like, I'm a geographer, I have no idea. I'm working on that one. And you kind of go, well, it's a eucalypt. Think could be Columbia. Don't quote me on that. And it's you have to be very general. But people have their specialties. So I think for people to remember is that no matter what background or passion you're coming from, you can build that into your career. So if you're coming from an ecotourism perspective, that's a fantastic thing, and you can become what in New South Wales we call a discovery ranger or an interpretive ranger, and that's a really, really valuable role. Or if you're an ecologist, you can come from more of a conservation background, and you'll have value in being able to assist in developing plans of management and assisting researchers working in your parks. And as a geographer, I suppose I've got that sort of landscape ecology perspective of the big picture stuff, which means that sometimes I'm able to step back a bit more from the really individual things we see in our parks and go, okay, but big picture, what's actually the purpose? Why are we managing this park? What are we managing it for? And everyone has different skills that they bring, and when you put it all together, you get a really fantastic team of people who are just passionate about doing their job and protecting these really amazing places.
There seems to be a huge amount of flexibility. If you just bring the right attitude, you can essentially bring your own skill sets and unique interests and find your place in the ranger
it's
community.
all about attitude, and a great sense of humour. That's quite important.
Because if you cried for a lot of things.
Then you're probably just going to cry. So really important to be able to laugh, and dark humour is definitely an asset.
Often is in these roles.
I think the crazier the role, and certainly I've noticed the more you are exposed to really intense situations, be it extreme fire or lots of emergency response, certainly the closer you are as a team, and the more you learn to laugh at things that perhaps are really, really wrong. But in your team, you're allowed to laugh at that, because
it's the only way to get through. Yeah.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
I mean, you've alluded to so many different things there, and just taking fire as an example, like not anyone can just go and fight a fire. Like surely you must be going through a huge amount of training for the number of scenarios that you could end up facing.
Yes. I suppose two important things you learn is hurry up and wait, is what you'll be doing a lot of.
That's good.
It should be like, hurry up, get ready, and then you'll get to fire ground, and then you could be waiting for a long time before you go and actually get tasked to do something. So you get really good at occupying yourself and learning to sleep at opportune moments. But the other thing is you're not going to pull up a bushfire, on your own. You're not going to be able to. Don't expect to don't stand in front of a huge wall of fire. It's not going to happen. Your job is to play your part in wherever you're tasked to assist with, and a lot of that is preventative or going ahead, and there's a lot of planning involved where you'll go and put in control lines somewhere well ahead of a fire. So people think that, when we're fighting a fire or getting it under control, you're sort of literally there at the front of flames putting wet stuff on the red stuff, as we say, but by and large you're not. You're working from the flanks, and safety is such an important part, the most important part of the thing, which is that we learn, and the thing that's drilled into us so much and all the training is safety, 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 because we don't want to lose any more rangers or staff or volunteers as we have in the past. And each year, certainly in South Australia, you watch the Dead Man Zone video, which has got terrible trumpet music, which everyone always complains, people who know will laugh. But it really drills messages home. It's very humbling and very sort of puts you back in your place. It talks about all these people who died fighting fires in parks. I think it was over in the 80s and the 90s. And there's quite a lot of amazing people who are very experienced. And it's just all these little things that you learn. So you're always told, this is what to do in what they call a burnover. Is the scariest thing you ever have to consider. And every year you do it as part of your preparation. So you have to drill a burnover where you practice, someone's on a hose and someone's looking after the pump or something, and you put siren on, and then you have to pretend a fire is coming, and you make safe getting into the vehicle and pretend a fire is going to go over the top of you. And as much as you go, it's just drill, in the time, like, it's very humbling experience. And it's kind of scary when you do it, because you're like, if this was real, particularly when you're in really small vehicles, this could be the end. Or we'd survive, but we'd have horrific injuries. So you have to face that reality and go, would I be able to, well, you can't know, but really sort of talk to yourself and go, am I comfortable doing this? And if you're not, you have to say so. And you are valuable in other things. You might be working in the incident control center, you could be assisting with command, you could be doing tasking and logistics. There are all sorts of things which are all just such an exceptionally valuable positions. Being on the front line is not the most important role. There's a hell of a lot of roles, but it is, you do go through a hell of a lot of training, and your individual skills or tasks will often dictate that. So if you do, for example, A rating or arduous rating, you can go and do remote work where you're helicoptered out and winched into a remote location to put in a control line. And it sounds kind of cool, but it's also kind of scary, because you could also get stuck there overnight, which would be a bit cold and miserable. But there's all sorts of different tasks. Or some people they're really good at doing chainsawing and managing trees, so hazardous trees, and doing fallen trees, so you can access those parts of fireground. And literally they spend every day just chainsawing trees, and that's really exhausting and physical work and very dangerous work. Some of the most hazardous work you'll do on fireground. So there's all these different things that you might do, and all of it requires a lot of training. And every year you do the same training, and you still have to relearn the same thing, and you're like, where was that pipe goes there? And every vehicle's different. So you think it's simple, and you just, you guys should know, you just jump on a vehicle and know how to use it, and it's not.
You've worked in a number of different teams as well, haven't you, in different areas? So I can imagine they all have their own unique ways of operating.
Even of calling vehicles, it really turns your head in. So moving from South Australia and having worked in Northern Territory and now New South Wales, they're all very different setups. South Australia is very fire focused because it's a very arid state, and as much as in Queensland, it's like get ready for the storm season and get your safety packs together because we're going to get cyclones and the rest. Down there, it's get ready for fire season. It's such a focus growing up there. So they had a really amazing fire program, and we had the big fire trucks, which people would consider fire appliance, and that's called a 3-4. And your little ute or utility vehicle with a water unit on the back is called a QRV, a quick response vehicle. Then you come to New South Wales, and suddenly they're talking about Cat 7s and Cat 9s, and I was like, what's that? And they go, a Cat 1 is a truck. I'm like, so call it a truck. So there's a lingo in every state, and they shorten things, and they'll go, Section 44. I was like, what on earth? They kept referring to it in the first few weeks I was working here. I'm like, what's a Section 44? They go, it's when they declare a state of emergency. I was like, just say that.
Yeah. Clear, concise communication, people.
Exactly. So they're like, we can just get recognition of your prior learning. And I was like, no, can I just start from scratch? Because I don't understand half the things that you're referencing. I need to know what I'm talking about. So it was really great because I learned all the new terms, but also I could contribute to the group, that fantastic group of new staff who were kicking off, and yeah, contribute my experience as well, which was great. And it was like 70% women, which was awesome.
Oh, that is cool. I was going to ask about that, sort of the men to women ratio. Certainly, I think it's rather stereotypically a man's job, if that makes sense, because it's physical. And I think that's the stereotype the world is moving through at the moment. But that's cool. So there is quite a high female workforce in the field as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that stems from, certainly from about when I was just starting to finish about mid 2000s, 2004, 2005. A lot of students going into the environmental area studying were women. It was like 80% female students in environmental management courses and that sort of thing. And that's definitely playing out in the professional world, where you're seeing a lot of women moving into ranger roles and particularly management roles. With the new staff, the unique thing about the fantastic staff I've come across in my retraining the last 5 months is that they were field staff, specifically field staff, so not rangers, so they just work in the field. And that's where we've had far fewer females, because it can be a very difficult space to work in, because it is much more male dominated and also a little bit rougher around the edges, we could say. So changing that culture has been a really amazing thing. And so seeing particularly really young, some of like 19 and 20-year-olds, super enthusiastic and coming into work in the field, who will be the leaders of tomorrow. And that was just absolutely fantastic to see. And they were even more excited about tractors and having a go at different things and wanting to go remotely. And like one particular student, Brooke, she was about 5 foot nothing and built like a stick, and she was super excited about learning to drive a tractor. And I was like, oh gosh, here goes Brooke. It was just fantastic. And the guys were like, wow, you really just like, yeah, I really want to learn to do tractor and then get on the dozer, and I want to learn all the plant and equipment. And we're like, you do that. Yeah, you do that, Brooke. Do you need a step to get up and do it? She's like, yeah, that's fine. It's fine.
Oh, bless. Enthusiasm counts for a lot.
Oh, it does. Yeah. And just a willingness to do anything like that. So a big part of it, the willingness to, I think I've been traumatized in digging holes because I've had some really difficult ones to dig. I think in northern South Australia it was almost like sort of clay, but then it was really ancient soils which had essentially massive rocks underneath. So you're kind of cutting it out with the jackhammer, and then the hole would start, this big and end up kind of this big because there was rock. So it takes you a whole day to dig one hole to put in one of the posts for a sign. So you have to be willing to accept that and sort of do the tough stuff. And that's what, you meet some amazing people because they are the people willing to do that and sort of have a laugh and go, well, this did go very well, we'll just keep cracking on, or let's make the best of it. And that's, it means you get really close and you have fantastic friends as your colleagues. So.
That's awesome. So something I am personally really interested in is native cultures and traditional cultures. And obviously in Australia, you have the Aborigine people. They've lived there and used the lands and thrived on the lands for over 40,000 years. How does it work with the national park and the reserves and you guys managing the countryside, as it were? I mean, for me, countryside is rolling hills, so that's very weird to say. But the wild spaces, I'm presuming you also have to be very respectful and sensitive to these cultures that are in the areas that you're working in and the native people who live there.
Yeah, it's actually, not surprisingly complex. It is quite complex in that it's also complex because of Australia as a country and our modern Australia's relationship with Indigenous Australians and the sort of ancient cultures that existed here well before white people arrived, because it's actually 60,000 years now.
Oh, is it? Okay.
So they're the oldest surviving culture in the world, actually.
Wow.
So, but of course, as they're not just one people, there is some amazing maps of Australia showing the different groups and even just language groups that we're even aware of, and it's like it makes Europe look simple. It's just ridiculously complex, and there's so much more to it than we really even understand. So in terms of managing wild places and the bush, as we call it in Australia, it's a little bit raggedy. It's not quite as pretty as the rolling hills. It's pretty rough. So,
bush, I think that's the word I was looking for. I was like, countryside is relevant, but it's also not. Yeah, the outback and the bush. There we go. That brings me
we're
right
quite literal
into
in Australia. It's like outback. It's the outback and it's bush.
That's it. Good.
So the
it's
outback
good to
and the
be
bush.
on point.
Yeah. So in Australia, the way we manage parks, so even though they're called national parks, as opposed to the system in the US, which is amazing, where they're nationally managed. It's like a federal organization. In Australia, or the states manage them.
Okay.
So I work for the state government, but more than that, there's also other protected areas that are not managed by state governments. There's some that are federally managed, called by Parks Australia. So Uluru is one of those. And there's also Indigenous protected areas, which they are a thing unto themselves. So they're managed by Indigenous Australians on their country, on their native title. They run them themselves. And so they have Indigenous rangers who look after them, and they're really amazing. And so they're not government run, but as some of them, as part of their native title, they get federal assistance. So there's some money that comes with that, which helps them manage the land, just as the government provides to other landholders. And each state's actually different in how they do that, because each state has approached that differently and reached a point of managing it sort of in harmony with Indigenous Australians in their own way, and at different timelines as well, because you've got more urban or high population states such as New South Wales, and all of ours are managed as they have Indigenous land use agreements. So all of my parks, I'm very happy to say, are have amazing Indigenous groups who I get to work with. So a lot of them are native title. So Western Bundjalung and Githable people and Widjabul Waibul and a few others in my parks alone. So they're state-based agreements, whereas when I worked in South Australia, they were federal, they're called co-managed parks. So you would have noticed in some of the names of the parks that I sent you, there's like a hyphen in them, because it'll be like Ikura Flinders Ranges. Eventually it will be just Ikura National Park, which is the local Indigenous word for that park, and the Vulkathana Gammon Ranges, which is, I love the Gammon Range. So that's a Vulkathana National Park, and that's the Adnyamathanha people. It's their word for that place. So some of those also come with some federal money, whereas when it's a state agreement, it doesn't necessarily come with that money. So native title and how that's accessed and how that's declared also changes things, and native title can be held over urban areas. So the Ghana people were awarded native title over the Adelaide area, and some people freaked out thinking it means, you know, they will lose their houses or something. It's got nothing to do with that. And there's just small parcels of land in the parks which form part of that native title agreement, and it means that we work more closely with them in helping them work on country and be a part of country. So we have, for example, in my parks, Githable Rangers who come and assist with managing some of our day use areas and visitor areas, and have just submitted a grant application to try and get them involved with some of our trail management, which would be fantastic because it's much more hands-on field work on country, as you call it. But I suppose I've also been very lucky in experiencing joint management, as I call it, in Northern Territory of parks, where the Juricha West MacDonnell Ranges National Park had amazing Indigenous Australians. It's just a really special place in Central Australia. You can really feel the energy when you're there, and it's absolutely magical, and you really are just helping to look after that country on their behalf. You know, it's not ours. It's a really different experience to some other areas where it can be more complex. So I suppose the challenge is that as a society, we're still learning to come to grips with that relationship, and it's not played out any more literally than in national park and protected area management. But I think that's also where you find the most respect, because you get that greater connection and you're on country in wild places with Indigenous people on their country, and it's so much more natural to have a great interaction and learn from them, and they feel so much more comfortable in these areas. So yeah, I've certainly had much better experiences on park than perhaps you would in a city area. But in saying that, I did tutoring when I was at the University of Queensland with the Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander program, and it was absolutely inspiring to tutor those students, because they worked so hard and were so passionate about their people and their country. And even though some of them, one of the guys he was just amazing, he was the same age as my parents, and he was tutoring him, but he'd had to redo some courses 4 or 5 times over because he'd had to stop to go and help a family member. But he didn't mind. That was what he did. That's what you do as part of his family, as part of his group. And so that was pretty inspiring, that even though it was going to take him, 7 years to do his degree at the rate he was going, he was still willing to put the effort in and still passionate about doing that, so he could work on country in environmental management. So
it's very interesting to hear. And you mentioned respect, and I really think respect is probably the key word. Respect on sort of the rangers role, respect on the Indigenous people, and trying to find that sort of common ground so you can work together, preserve what needs to be preserved and protect what needs to be protected. But yeah, I can imagine it's been a long old journey to get to that, and to find the peace and harmony within that in all the different regions and all the different ways that things need managing.
And even with the value and importance of culture and respecting, sometimes when some groups are very protective and are not comfortable with actually sharing that with the public, or and unfortunately in today's society, sometimes you can't allow the public to see and experience some really amazing places because they do disrespect it. So it's a really fine line, and a part of some of the cultures is even younger people who are within that group are not allowed to learn anything about a language, or they might not be allowed to learn a lot of things about country until they've earned that right. And that's not your age, that's not your work experience, that's not how educated you are. It's about respect. So it's how you respect your culture, it's about your attitude. And if you squandered your youth, or you didn't have respect for your people and your elders and your country, then you're not going to be privy to that information, even if it means sometimes losing that knowledge altogether, which we find a tragedy, but is really important for them as a culture. And it's really difficult to accept that, I suppose, as someone looking from the outside in, but as a real testament to how strongly they feel and how much they respect their traditions and are willing to literally go to the grave going, you're not the right person to know this, so I'm happy to have that end with me,
Wow. No, that's yeah, I can see how that must be you must have to be very adaptive to sort of just see what comes up as things evolve. But yeah, okay. So I would like to also just to touch on a few other things you've mentioned previously in the conversation. So I just wanted, there's so many things, as I say, I want to dive into. I feel like I'm skimming across a lot of things, but perhaps we could have another chat in depth about different things in particular at another time. But I'm curious because anyone who's followed my work with Spend More Time in the Wild knows that I'm all about getting people outside for mental and physical health. The benefits of being outside in wild, quote unquote, or actual wild spaces is so proven to be so beneficial for us. Obviously, in the UK, we don't have quite the same dangers and risks as you guys do. How are you in your ranger team, so it may or may not be you in particular, but as a team and as a network of leaders, essentially helping to make the outdoor more accessible, so for all people, whatever gender, race, age, disability, but also making sure people are staying safe and that the landscape is being protected. I know that's quite a deep question, but could we just run through a few things that you guys are actively working on at the moment?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. It's something I'm actually particularly passionate about. So there's, I suppose, the more obvious side of accessibility is people perceive it as, oh, you make it wheelchair accessible. But there's so much more than that. And one of the projects I was working on in South Australia, where there's a fantastic focus on accessibility in the really broader sense of the word, where providing information is a really big thing. So providing good, clear information, the right information, and where people can get to it and it would expect to find it. So burying it somewhere deep in a website where it's intuitive to Sheldon Cooper doesn't really make sense to, your average Joe or elderly Australians who might not be as comfortable on the internet. So one of the things we did was working with people actually, in fact, with the physical impairment, so they were in wheelchairs or similar accessibility challenges, and it was actually information on slope and for trails and the actual surface type. And is there silt, is it a hard surface, is there a capping on top, what is the gradients, corners, width, all that kind of thing. We never thought of that. So providing more detailed trail maps with that really detailed information, so they would know if an electric wheelchair would make it, or if they need to have a sports one, or if they need to have the assisted wheelchair, and right down to creating sort of sensory gardens or other forms of interpretation which are accessible to people with visual or even hearing impaired, so they can sort of feel things more or listen to things, and in areas where they couldn't necessarily, like having things that go up into the canopy, so they might not be aware of how high it goes, but they can hear things that they would normally hear on the ground. And providing really good information about visitor areas for people who have children with autism and similar issues, where they need to know, is there a safe space for them to go to? Is it really loud? Is it close to a car park? Is there accessible parking for people who are not necessarily in a wheelchair, but close to a picnic or a barbecue, where they might need to essentially bail with their child really quickly from a party or something? So that kind of information being readily available makes life possible for these kids to visit some of our wild places, and sort of providing really good information on exactly what that experience will be like. So being accurate with how long a track is and what the surface will be like, and is it really dark? I mean, there could be that there's a kid with some challenges where they can't stand the dark, so being really clear that it's an enclosed rainforest with canopy as opposed to a wide open like the Larapinta Trail, two very different places, and how hot and how cold and how many other people might be there, that sort of thing. We can provide that information. That makes a huge difference for people being able to access these spaces. So I suppose what we're doing as organisations across Australia is looking at that information side of things, because that's something that is very much achievable no matter your budget constraints, which is something you always have to consider in the environment industry. And what is easy to do with time limitations and with short time scales and with limited staff or resources, what can you achieve with what you have now? And that's the sort of thing that you can do. And other things is just improving entry locations for going to these wild places. So you're being very clear with providing information on what is and isn't appropriate to be there, communicating what the National Parks Code, leave no trace, which they're essentially the same thing, but they call it the National Parks Code, and right of way as well, how you share a trail, bikes being an increasingly big part of our national park space. We had it as a bit of a compliance program in South Australia, but really it was about, the I Share My Trail thing was about people learning to respect each other on the trail, where you might have had historically, 50 years of hiking, and it was very much a hiking park, and suddenly you've got mountain bikes in there, and a lot of young people who've never experienced, maybe haven't done hiking before, so they're not familiar with what's safe and isn't safe when they're on a bike and going really fast. So some of those things about safety, respect, National Parks Code, leave no trace, and improving, car parks and information and that, because in Australia in particular, in the sort of the golden age of parks, you could say, the sort of 70s and 80s, when we had a lot more ranges and a lot more capacity to put infrastructure in place, we're now rationalising a lot of that and going, well, what do people actually want to go and see and do, and what do they need to know and have access to? So we're trying to improve that, because we do have across Australia a lot of ageing infrastructure and information that's not current enough for people to, they'll see, oh, it's an old sign, they won't even bother reading it. But if it's new and current and hits the mark and will get that information across, that's really, really important.
Yeah, it seems there's so much to consider, especially as more and more people are wanting to access these spaces, education, understanding, access points. There is a lot to consider. Now I'm interested because, the word ranger for me, I've traveled all over the world hiking different trails. I've bumped into a lot of rangers, and being a ranger is a very dangerous job. And I think that's often overlooked. 2 to 3 rangers are lost every week as a direct result of their conservation duties worldwide. And you yourself have worked, and I believe still do, as a volunteer for the Thin Green Line Foundation. There's the International Ranger Foundation. They run Ranger Day, World Ranger Day on the 31st of July, to commemorate rangers who are killed or injured in their line of duty, and to celebrate and recognize what they're doing, what you are doing, for the planet's natural treasures and cultural heritage. And this is something that you hold very close to your heart. And here we are, 2021. And you emailed me at the end of 2020 with a beautifully long email. Boy, do I love long emails, but I was completely absorbed in what you were saying. I punched the air when I finished it, like, yes, come on. And you're wanting to do something this year to recognize the work of rangers worldwide. Would you mind jumping in a little bit to what the Thin Green Line is, and a little bit about the International Ranger Foundation and what rangers are doing?
Absolutely. So when I was a ranger in South Australia, I was very lucky to be involved with the South Australian Ranger Association that is heavily involved with the Thin Green Line Foundation. So I had the opportunity to meet Sean Millimore, who at the time was the president of the International Ranger Federation, and the founder of the Thin Green Line Foundation. So the Thin Green Line is essentially the charity arm of the International Ranger Federation, and supports the families of rangers killed on the front line, and also provides training and support for rangers, particularly in those highest risk sort of situations and most challenging environments and countries, to support their work and being as safe as possible. So it all kicked off with Sean, who used to be a ranger in Victoria, and he met some amazing rangers at the World Ranger Congress, which is held every 4 years, and he was inspired to quit his job, mortgage his house, and travel the world with very little money to film and learn the stories of rangers and really tell their story. And that documentary was called The Thin Green Line. He raised quite a lot of money for rangers, but then was told that there wasn't actually a mechanism or way of giving this money to the rangers who needed it, because the International Ranger Federation wasn't a charity. So he said, yeah, all right. If you listen to some of his talks, he always touches on it. He's like, yeah, I'm going to have to do this. Because he was flying back and was sitting next to this fellow, and he asked him, what do you do? And he's like, oh, I'm a lawyer. I set up charities. He was like,
Look
yeah,
at that.
it's a sign. So
Timing.
he set up the Thin Green Line Foundation because he's an absolute legend. So he was able to funnel that money to where it needed to go, and it's pretty much taken over his life. So he is the face of the Thin Green Line. He is the Thin Green Line, and he's raised, hundreds of thousands of dollars, indeed I think millions of dollars now, for rangers all over the world. And it even starts as little as, the small amounts at World Ranger Day. We always hold sausage sizzles, and rangers around Australia and around the world, you hold your little sign that says I stand with rangers, and you have your morning tea or your barbecue or whatever it is, and everyone puts in their coinage, and we're all pretty poor people, so it means a lot. And we all raise money and contribute to this. Money goes straight to the ground, so it provides first aid training. It puts literally roofs over the heads of some rangers. It provides training facilities, teaches them how to use firearms safely and avoid an ambush. It puts the kids through school of rangers who've been killed and their whole livelihoods are gone. It supports the wives and partners, and indeed now with so many amazing female rangers, for example, in Africa, they are the only person providing for their children. So when they're killed in the line of duty, that's it. Their kids are orphans. So supporting them is so important, because a lot of these rangers don't even get paid, or what they get paid is nothing. They can barely put food on the table, but they're so passionate about what they do. So I suppose it's also part of being a big ranger family when you find out very quickly after becoming a ranger that you're part of something a hell of a lot bigger than yourself. And it's really inspiring to meet these people and learn their stories and know that we're part of something bigger. And when they hear that you're supporting them, when Sean shows them, you know, the videos, the photos of us around the world, they're just blown away and absolutely just amazed, and they're so proud and they feel so supported and so passionate because we're all thinking of them and supporting them, and it's just such a beautiful thing and a rare thing to have been a part of.
I'm getting goosebumps just listening to this, I have to say. It's so powerful, you know, that connectiveness that you guys have all got in your collective mission to protect the wild spaces. That's so special, truly unique.
Absolutely. And so, working with the South Australian Ranger Association, I was quite heavily involved. And as part of that, I was allowed to do quite a lot of work in supporting the Thin Green Line and did quite a lot of volunteering. And since then, I sort of haven't been able to, I feel like I've been able to contribute as much as I would like. And then listening to different podcasts and watching your videos and meeting rangers around Australia as well, and seeing sort of their own struggles. I was sort of had a crazy idea of, well, I could do a really big thing and raise quite a lot of money and show people what we have in Australia. COVID's getting us to focus back home. So let's have a look at our own backyard and let rangers tell their stories. You know, it's been 15 years since the original Thin Green Line documentary, and I think it's the right time to Sean to, you know, tell the story of what's happened in those 15 years, and our hopes and dreams for the future and sort of the state of where things are at. So I came up with the idea of walking Australia's Thin Green Line. So showing the world through rangers' stories, hiking and talking to them in their parks about what they do, how they became a ranger, the amazing place they work in and what inspires them, and the challenge that they face and that their parks face. So as part of that, also to highlight the plight of our rangers who are killed every year, I'm aiming to hike a kilometre for every ranger killed since 2009, which is over 1,000 kilometres. So more than that, I wanted everyone to be able to participate in that as well. So as part of that, we're going to offer everyone the opportunity to walk with us in walking a kilometre for every ranger killed on the front line so that we can raise money. Sorry.
Oh, bless you. It really is so, your passion for this, your empathy, your humility, everything just comes through as you're talking, and gosh, I'm feeling the emotion right now. It's so incredible, and obviously it's still early stages. You know, there's a lot of evolution that can happen with this project. None of us know what 2021 is going to look like with COVID, but just the heart that you're putting into this, and also the commitment. This is no small project that you have come up with here. But in the few conversations we've had through Patreon, you're a supporter of Wild. You know, just your dedication to this, and dedication to your role, and dedication to your fellow colleagues and rangers and team members is so admirable. And the fact that you're stepping out and you're organizing this, just so much respect for you. And as you were saying, so you're going to try and get the public involved as well. You're going to spread the word and create this new film.
So essentially at this point the project is called Walking Australia's Thin Green Line. Sean and I haven't had a chance to sort of sit down and nut out the details. It has been a crazy month since I came up with the idea. I think it took him a while to read my very long email as well.
There was so much to digest in that. I was like, I can't reply to this straight away. I need to sleep on this because wow. That's
it. But the driving force behind it was to raise money for obviously the Thin Green Line directly, but specifically also to put money aside for Australia's rangers to support them in accessing mental health support and crisis support, because that's one of the things that struck me is when I've worked in the different jurisdictions is just how many rangers live with poor mental health and really battle mental health issues, which are so or not caused by, but contributed to significantly by the work that they do. And people might assume that, you know, that's due to dealing with emergency situations, which is one of the things that does affect people. You know, the summer fires have considerably affected rangers. You know, they saw not just only their, you know, put their lives at risk, and some people have, I suppose, finding life very difficult now, reflecting back on how close they came to losing their lives, but also seeing their parks just lost, seeing animals suffering, because so many rangers are very passionate about animals and about the environment, and seeing that suffering really affects people. And even the drought before that, you know, going and when we were doing fence patrols in Central Australia and some of the other range, when they came back, they said it was just carnage along the fence lines. It's just literally bodies hanging on the fence because they couldn't get to a water source. So it's things like that that people don't realise so deeply affect a lot of protected area staff, because they are so passionate about what they do. And not to mention, throw on top of that the sometimes feeling of, are you even making, like, seeing the impacts of climate change and destruct on the environment, and the impact that development has, and the changes to their parks with climate change occurring, that can be really soul destroying. Some of them have worked in these parks for 30, 40 years and they've seen that happen, and they're like, well, I'm about to retire. What was the point of what I've done for 40 years if it's just going to be wiped out, you know? And that's a really hard thing to live with when you're someone who's so passionate and has achieved so much in those parks. Yeah. You know, there's a fellow in my office who's, you know, he was the first ranger in the parks I look after, the first one. And some of these are World Heritage rainforests, they're absolutely phenomenal. And they were forestry areas, so they were gutted of some beautiful trees. But, you know, he's, you know, for 40 years, protected them and improved them and helped visitors get access to them. And yeah, it's got to be a pretty scary thing to consider the impacts climate change are going to have on these places that he looked after for decades. So all of that combined, and the sort of, I suppose, not awesome access that you necessarily have as a government employee, it's true, means I think, yeah, rangers are often forgotten as people who, you know, we also euthanize animals. That's the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. And that's something that really takes a piece from you. Yeah. So, you know, we know that vets struggle a lot with mental health for that reason, but people don't realize that that's something that rangers do. You know, we have to euthanize animals. We have to see animals suffer in fires when we do fire response. We have to see people, visitors, when they've lost loved ones, or when they're, you know, very, very badly injured, and help them through the worst day in their life. And we're not paramedics, and we're not police officers, and we're not full-time firefighters. So we don't have the same kind of levels of support that these first line responders have. So I just thought it was important to give back to Australia's rangers, which is why I wanted it to be focusing on Australia's Thin Green Line and showing the public that these are the people they're coming across. And, you know, be kind to a ranger when you see them, because it's not the easiest gig in the world. It might be the greatest office indeed, but we're not always in it. And there's always, as with any job, downsides and struggles. But when you are the job, and when it is so much a part of who you are, that really makes it so much harder to live with those changes when a budget changes, or there's things you can't look after in your park. It's a very, very personal thing. So part of the project is supporting, Australia's protected area staff access mental health and crisis support.
Yeah. So as you as this project continues to develop, because I believe you're going to kick it all off on World Ranger Day, the 31st of July, I will make sure, you know, to share in the show notes all the links and details to anything that you confirm that is going to be going out there. I mean, you know, whether it is a kind of podcast thing, whether you share videos throughout the event, ways people can get involved. But right now, because this will go out before everything launches, what can people do? And this is going to be quite a big question in one way, because obviously, as I mentioned earlier, not all of our listeners are down south, as it were. You know, what can we do? What can we do to support rangers worldwide? Because, you know, you mentioned climate change. I mean, I had a bit of a mental crash, like literally the weekend just gone, because of climate change, looking at the situation, just feeling powerless despite doing all of the little things and being a big believer that they add up. So yes, we could focus on climate change, but actually, is there anything right now that listeners can go away and think about, mull over and implement in their life that we can do in support of rangers worldwide?
Absolutely. I mean, apart from there's the obvious of checking out the thin green line and providing financial support for those in a position to be able to do so. They have some really cool merchandise, so check it out. But also in your own, wherever you are in the world, you can support your rangers by doing the right thing when you visit wild places and helping to educate others as well. So when you go for a walk, you know, take a bag and pick up rubbish when you see it. Make sure you leave no trace when you do visit. But get your kids out there, get other people out there, to people who are more inside people outside when you're allowed to, and show them the world that's out there and help them understand that even the smallest little things like using less water, being smart about what you buy at the supermarket, what you consume, and your footprint on the earth, it all adds up. And if everyone just does their little bit, it can be the smallest little thing. If that's all you're able to achieve, then that's huge. You know, it's the small steps that all collectively together, you know, a drought is ended with, you know, it starts with one raindrop, but you know, it can end up in a flood. So if everyone does their little bit to just contribute, just turn off that light, or do you really need to be using that, you know, equipment, or do you need to buy that new thing, or can you live with what you've already got? When you're using camping equipment, do you need the latest thing? I can't really talk, I've got a new tent, but you know, it's about thinking about your footprint, and probably most importantly, when you're out in a park and you see staff, be nice, be kind, say good day, how are you going, you know, what's happening, ask them about the park. They're passionate, they want to talk about their park, they love talking about their park, and you know, have a joke and a laugh with them, and that's really, really brightens your day. And just saying thanks can go a hell of a long way. So that would be a really great thing if everyone just said, how are you going, and thanks for what you do. That'd really make a lot of rangers' days. Yeah,
I think that's an amazing place to sort of start to wrap this up, just with that positivity, you know, because we could look at the situation in many situations in the world right now and sort of faceplant. I know I myself have been in that situation and we've had some good chats about the things that have been going on, but you're right, there are so many things we can do, and actually they are things we have been, you know, told and suggested and encouraged to do for a very long time. But it's that consciousness, that awareness that needs to be filtered through the education, and then the willingness to show up and give things a go, and commit and own our part. And it is that humility. This is a collective effort, but we can do it and we can make a difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Alrighty then. So just to finish up then, the One Wildlife podcast I have pulled together 10 quick fire questions that I ask every guest. The questions are quite short, but your answer can take a little longer if you want. One or two you've actually answered, but I will ask them anyway, just in case you want to go off on anything else. So if you're ready, we'll kick it off with question number 1.
Sure.
Okay. What was the last book that you read and you loved?
I've read a lot of books lately. This is probably going to be bad. It was actually an offer from a gentleman. It's Julia Quinn's book about the Bridgertons. It's great. Love romance books.
The Bridgertons. Yeah. Actually, my partner's been watching that. I think that's on Netflix now.
Oh, my mum and I would just watch it. We were so excited because it was a book series written in the 80s and 90s, and we both loved it. And then I was like, Mum, it's a TV series now. Yeah.
I have to let her know that there's books. That's curious.
They're great. I mean, they're, you know, the classic typical romance books, but they're fun. They're great. Loved it.
Bit of escapism.
It's like the 5th time I've read each one, so you know.
Oh, you really do like them then.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, cool. Question number 2. Are you a morning or an evening person?
Evening. Easy.
Why?
Just ask my sister. Me and mornings, just not great friends. I've always been a night owl, to the point where when I was a kid, I used to just, my parents were their wits end what to do. My sister and I ended up in separate rooms very quickly, because she is to bed with the sun and up with the sun. I am like, let's stay awake and reorganize the books on the shelf until 2 a.m. and then sleep in until 12 p.m. So it did not work, because I would keep her up and then she would make me up. So that's,
I'm sure you've seen some good sunsets though.
This is true. This is true.
There you go. All right. So something you could do whilst watching a good sunset is eat an ice cream. If you were reincarnated as an ice cream flavour, what flavour would you be?
I remember this question on the list in Patreon. Can I just choose my favourite one? Gelato in Italy. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Not
that is
gelato.
the way. Yeah.
Hazelnut gelato. Oh my gosh, my favorite.
Thank you. Can we have some hazelnut appreciation, please? Like, this is the place to do
I got to
it.
walk past the hazelnut trees between uni and where I lived in Italy. Like, it was where hazelnuts are from. It's where Ferrero Rocher and Nutella was invented. So absolutely. I mean, that was what got us through exams. I don't know how many gelatos we had every day when we were studying.
Definitely one of the best ways to go, and definitely one of the best ice cream flavors, in my opinion.
Yes.
So yes, I'm on board with that. Okay, so you've answered the next question, but I'll ask it anyway, just in case there was anything else in the mix. What did you want to be when you were growing up? Was it just a geologist, or was there anything else?
I wanted to be a lot of things. I find the world a very fascinating place. But there was that, I was very influenced by the movies I watched. There was that, geology, archaeology, and what was the other one? Anthropologist. So it was like Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, and I don't know where the geology came from. But I loved natural disaster movies. My sister wanted to be a climatologist because of Twister, so it's a theme.
Fair.
Yeah.
Nice one. Okay, so next one, pretty serious question. What is your most unusual talent?
What about unusual? I yell with my eyes, apparently.
Okay, fine. Communicative.
The raised eyebrow was like my sister drives her nuts. I'm just doing that. Just stop it, because she can't do it. I was very quiet as a kid. Amazingly, I know. Spoke very few words. In fact, when I was really little, full-on mafia voice, like, stop it, go away. Like, it was complete mafia voice. And I didn't say much, so I said a lot with my eyes.
The eyes.
To the point where there's this thing called the look, apparently, that I do, that's like a very significant look when I'm obviously very unhappy with someone. And apparently I even did that to like my prep teacher. He was very excited to tell my mum one day. She's like, oh, I got the look today. My mum was mortified. She's like, oh gosh, why did she do that?
Earning a bit of a reputation there.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Hidden talent is yelling with my eyes.
Unusual, but there we go. That's what I was asking for. Nice one. Okay, so you've talked about a lot of people who've inspired you, but is there anyone in particular who has inspired you the most in your life? Does anybody jump out?
Oh, there's a lot of inspiring people. And obviously people I've worked with and that kind of thing. There's so many. I don't know that I haven't mentioned them already. I mean, some great rangers, like Kerry Villiers, who was a district ranger who I chose to work at that office specifically to work with Kerry, and then she moved interstate, which was really handy. But there's, really amazing rangers who are passionate about what they do. But I suppose also my mum's a really inspiring person, having sort of overcome her own difficulties and what she's dealt with in life, and, having that positivity and the way she showed my sister and I, the world is your oyster, and we had this sense of the greater world out there. And so many kids that I knew growing up didn't, particularly in Melbourne, like they didn't think outside their own little suburb. It was, they just didn't consider the world, whereas we from a very young age were like, wow, the world's out there. And, you have parents read their kids' books, and we did that too, but also we were allowed to choose a topic, and then mum would tell us a story about that. She always hated when I'd choose them, because she'd be like, so what are we doing it about? I'd be like, a rock. And when you're exhausted having to deal with two kids and you have to think on your feet about, I was really, really great about just naming random inanimate objects and really useful topics. But she made it into something really amazing and could tell stories so well that, it was always better than the book. And I suppose I think that gave us that sense of wonder and awe, and that the world is a phenomenal and a wondrous place, which it is, but not everyone grows up with that.
It goes a long way, really, doesn't it? So that's really lovely.
Absolutely.
All right, one that I know will tick a lot of boxes. What is your favorite food?
Most food. Food generally. Food is an amazing thing.
Just food.
Just food. Favorite foods. That's such a big question. Well, could we say it's like the best meal I've ever eaten?
Yes. That's good.
Best
I like
meal
that.
I've ever eaten was with my sister in Italy, in Rome. One of my mates from the university in Italy said, there's a great enoteca near the Spanish Steps in Rome. The guy who owns it, his mum makes a big like a big pot of pasta, grab a glass of wine, and we had an amazing glass of Merlot with the most phenomenal duck ragu with pappardelle I've ever had in my life. And my sister and I still wax lyrical about that one. We still dream about that. Nothing will ever live up to that meal. It's my favorite foods are things that are cooked with love and passion and meaning, and all about conviviality, which is very much the slow food movement.
Yeah, that is awesome. Okay, question 9, nearly there. What is your favorite outdoor space?
It's like those questions where they go, is it the beach or the mountains that you like more? Because I'm always very conflicted in that question.
That's it.
Oh, favorite outdoor space probably is actually the beach and the ocean, because, I've always grown up with spending, Christmas, me's to me's family and time at Lennox Head on the coast on Eastern Australia, in one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's my favourite place in the world. And it has a beautiful beach and the amazing ocean, and you can just, it can fix anything being there. It's a very special place. So I'd have to say the beach, yeah.
It does sound like a half decent place to hang out, I have to say.
And the Hemsworth brothers are just a stone's throw away at Byron Bay, so that helps too,
Fair enough. Okay, final question. Are there any catchphrases or mantras that you live your life by?
You're only young once, but you can be immature forever. I do like that one.
I've not heard that, but that is good.
Absolutely. I think I definitely know I live by that when people are going, oh, I didn't realize you were so old. And I'm like, yeah, I do act like a bit of a child, but I am actually 34. If you just don't say anything when you're at training and they're all a bunch of like early 20s, mid 20s, they have no idea. So I think, having that ability to laugh and finding joy and just being, having a young view on life, I think is really important, and not getting too stuck in things. And so that's sort of unconsciously do. But I suppose the other one, which is kind of helped with the path I've chosen in life, which is a very windy one and very different, which I quite like, is be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
So, I always keep coming back to that when you're having one of those days where you're just like, woe is me, and I'm going to be woe is me because I am. And it's just, but then you're like, yeah, but if you want to actually be the change in the world, just get off your butt and do this, because you complain about other people. And, it's one of those things where it's a good one to be able to come back to and go, yes, this might be tough, or yes, you might be being like, I just want to have a lazy day, or it's just a bit of a struggle. And you're like, but if I don't, then who will? So and that was why I came back to study NRM in Australia. It's like, it's about walking the walk as well as talking the talk. And that's sort of a big thing. So, yeah.
So much respect for that. And, I think that is just the best place to end this podcast, that we can, as we said earlier, all play our part. And, I want to say thank you on behalf of myself and all the listeners for all the work you're doing to protect the Australian wild spaces, the animals, and engage the community. It really is making a difference. So thank you so much. And thank you for this chat. It's been really lovely to dive into this with you. And hopefully we can chat again soon.
Yeah, no, thanks for the opportunity. It's been fantastic. Yeah,
nice
loved
one.
it.
And we'll definitely have you back on as well when your project's up and running. We'll get that out there and get people involved. That'll be really good.
Yeah, brilliant. Sounds good.
Nice one. All right, Amanda. Well, you take care and speak soon.
Will do.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the One Wildlife podcast with me, Abbie Barnes, and Amanda Dudgeon as our guest. I thoroughly enjoyed speaking to Amanda and was left feeling incredibly pumped to explore new ways in which I can do more to steward wild spaces both locally and further afield. Amanda drops so many empowering gems throughout this conversation, so I'd like to encourage you to come back and re-listen if you've been left feeling inspired. You can contact Amanda and find out more about her work via the show notes. But before you head off, don't forget to hit subscribe and share this podcast with your friends and families, whether through a link or a screenshot. Tag us across social media, and do check out our Patreon community if you are looking to connect with others around the world who are all investing in a bigger picture. Stay wild, folks, and see you soon.